Even after copping a plea, Boosie just got sentenced on firearm possession, and for the first time it feels like there's no coming back. But the sentence itself ain't the most shocking part. According to Boosie, he's being framed by the system.
The fact that I was sentenced to third offense marijuana, 10 years? I was sentenced to 10 years. The system been let me out.
Some say this all ties back to when he beat his death row case. Let me break it down. When keeping it real goes wrong, the streets are buzzing, the hood is in shock, and hip-hop just lost one of its realest soldiers. Torrance Ivy Hatch Jr., better known to the culture as Boosie Badazz, just took a plea that might have him saying goodbye to the game forever.
It's just a plea that I'm doing on August 26th.
But real talk, to understand how we got here, we got to go back to where it all started. The grimy streets of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where young Torrance first picked up that mic and started spitting bars about the struggle. Boosie's legal history has been marked by several encounters with the justice system, and that criminal record would come back to haunt him in ways he never imagined. The foundation of all this drama got laid back in '08, when what should have been just another day in the hood turned into the beginning of a nightmare that's still going strong. On October 22, 2008, Boosie was arrested by East Baton Rouge Sheriff's deputies after authorities found marijuana and a Glock handgun in his vehicle. Now any street dude knows that getting caught with weed in a piece ain't nothing new, but this was Boosie's third strike with the marijuana, and that made all the difference in how the system was about to railroad him.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been fighting this thing from the very, very beginning?
I've been fighting for probably 3 years now. Probably.
3 years.
The young rapper, who was just starting to blow up in the dirty South hip-hop scene, found himself trapped in the prison industrial complex that's been destroying black men for generations. Boosie pleaded guilty to the third offense marijuana possession charge on September 22, 2009. What happened next was some straight-up judicial madness. Judge Chip Moore initially hit him with a 2-year bid, but when they discovered Boosie had violated his house arrest between the plea and sentencing, the judge doubled that time to 4 years on November 9, 2009.
Now, it was a state case. The feds came, picked it up. They had a ruling in the Supreme Court that went in my favor, and the case got dropped by the judge. The case got dropped.
The case got dropped. But the system wasn't finished trying to break this young black man from the projects. While he was already locked up, they decided to stack on even more charges that would keep him behind bars for damn near a decade. In 2011, while still in prison, Boosie faced fresh drug-related charges for attempting to smuggle contraband inside. He pleaded guilty to those charges, which extended his sentence to 8 years. The rising star who had been making noise in the rap game suddenly found himself staring down almost 10 years in the pen.
The fact that I was sentenced to third offense marijuana, 10 years? I was sentenced to 10 years. The system been let me out.
But the most serious heat was still coming in what would become one of the most talked about murder cases in Louisiana's recent history. On June 17, 2010, Boosie was indicted for the first-degree murder of Terry Boyd, who was killed in 2009. The prosecution tried to paint the picture that Boosie had hired Michael Marlowe Mike Lowing to handle his business. Allegedly part of a murder-for-hire plot over territory beef, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If they convicted him, he was looking at the death penalty.
I was sentenced to 10 for third offense marijuana.
Yeah.
How you know if I'm drug addict if you never send me to rehab? I was sent straight to the pen. How am I, you know if I'm a drug addict if you've never offered me rehab?
The prosecutors were trying to paint Boosie as some cold-blooded killer, suggesting he might have been connected to at least 5 other bodies, though they never had enough evidence to actually charge him with those. The case became a circus, with prosecutors using everything from Boosie's rap lyrics to phone records as so-called evidence. Songs like 187 In and Body Bag, which he had recorded around the time Terry Boyd got killed, were being dissected line by line in the courtroom, with prosecutors claiming these weren't just bars but actual confessions. Boosie entered a not guilty plea on June 28, 2010 in a Louisiana courtroom. His defense team went hard, arguing that the prosecution's whole case was built on the word of Michael Lowing, whose testimony was shakier than a crack house in an earthquake. The defense was so confident they didn't even call witnesses. They just rested their case, basically saying the prosecution had nothing solid. The tension in that Louisiana courtroom must have been thick as smoke in a trap house as 12 jurors deliberated on whether one of the South's most promising rap talents would live or die. The whole hip-hop community was holding its breath, knowing that a conviction wouldn't just end Boo's career, but potentially his life. On May 11, 2012, a jury acquitted Boosie of the murder charge after less than 10 minutes of deliberation. That quick decision showed everybody what many already knew. The prosecution's case was weaker than watered-down liquor. The acquittal was a major W for Boosie and his people, but the damage was already done. Years of his prime had been stolen by the system. Even though he beat the murder rap, Boosie was still locked up on those drug charges. He finally got released on March 5, 2014 after serving approximately 5 years of his 8-year sentence. His early release was probably due to good behavior and some legal maneuvering by his attorneys. But the experience had changed him forever. The young wild rapper who went in was now a hardened veteran who understood how the game really worked. Following his release, Boosie remained on parole until 2018, which meant he was still under the system's thumb with all kinds of restrictions and monitoring. But instead of being broken by what he'd been through, Boosie seemed hungrier than ever. He dove back into his music career like his life depended on it, dropping project after project and rebuilding his fan base. The comeback story became part of his legend. However, those old convictions were like a chain around his neck that he could never fully shake. Federal and state laws that stopped convicted felons from having straps would keep coming back to bite him. His status as a convicted felon from the 2011 drug conviction amplifies the severity of firearm-related charges, as federal law prohibits felons from possessing guns. The same script kept playing out in the years after his release. In 2019, Boosie was arrested in Noon in Georgia during a traffic stop after a deputy observed a white Dodge Charger swerving and nearly sideswiping another vehicle. The familiar scene played out again. The officer smelled that sticky icky, searched the whip, and found drugs and a loaded gun. But it was what happened on May 6, 2023 in San Diego, California, that would set everything in motion for the legal drama that's now threatening to take Boosie away from the streets and his family indefinitely. The rapper had traveled to America's finest city to shoot a video and perform at a club in the Gaslamp Quarter. Just another routine business trip that would turn into his biggest legal nightmare since beating that murder case over a decade earlier. Social media snitching and federal pressure. The sun was setting over San Diego's Choice View neighborhood on May 6, 2023, when what should have been just another day of grinding and getting money for Boosie Badazz turned into a federal case that would have the culture talking for years. The 42-year-old rapper from the Red Stick had rolled up to Southern California with big plans. He was supposed to shoot a video and perform that night at the Phantom Lounge and nightclub in the bougie Gaslamp Quarter. What the OG couldn't have predicted was that the boys in blue were already watching his every move, waiting for him to slip up. The irony of the whole situation was some real street shit. Boosie, who built his whole career on keeping it 100 with his fans and never switching up, was doing exactly what made him authentic, sharing his real-time experiences on social media. According to court documents, San Diego police, while monitoring an Instagram livestream of a known neighborhood gang member, observed a man later identified as Boosie with a black handgun tucked into his waistband in a residential backyard. Real talk in today's social media era, where rappers live their lives online for the fans, Boosie's natural instinct to show his followers what was really going on inadvertently gave the feds all the ammunition they needed to launch a major operation. The same transparency that made him beloved in the hood became the trap that caught him slipping. Using an airborne law enforcement unit, basically a police chopper, authorities tracked him to a black SUV. The level of resources they deployed for this bust was some serious overkill. Multiple units, helicopter surveillance, and coordinated tracking, all focused on a rapper who was just in town to make some money and connect with his West Coast fan base. When they finally made their move and pulled that traffic stop, the results were exactly what the boys were hoping for. The search revealed 2 loaded handguns in the vehicle, 1 Glock and 1 Hellcat, along with Boosie and another cat named Billy Johnson. Finding those pieces set off a whole chain reaction that would dominate the next phase of Boo's life. At first, the situation looked manageable from where Boosie was sitting. He faced state charges, including possession of a firearm by a felon, concealed carry in a vehicle, possession of ammunition by a prohibited person, and being an unlisted owner of a registered firearm. His lawyer, Megan Blanco, had let him know he was prepared to cop a plea to the state charges with expectations of getting probation instead of more time behind bars.
First, it was a state case. Your lawyers came in. The state case was dropped.
The strategy made sense from a street perspective. Boosie had learned from his previous legal battles that sometimes the smartest play is to take responsibility, work with the system, and keep it moving. His fans understood his situation, and there was real hope that this latest legal speed bump would get handled quickly and quietly. Then came the plot twist that nobody saw coming. On June 14, 2023, the state charges were dismissed during a court appearance in San Diego County Superior Court. For a brief moment, it looked like Boosie had dodged another legal bullet. The relief must have been overwhelming. Another close call that he had somehow managed to navigate successfully. But that relief lasted about as long as a Newport in a crack house. Moments after the state charges were dismissed, federal agents arrested Boosie outside the San Diego courthouse on a federal charge of being a felon in possession of a firearm based on the same May 6th incident. The ATF boys had taken over the case, citing federal laws that prohibit convicted felons from having straps. The shock of this development hit different. Boosie's attorneys, Megan Blanco and Damon Alamori, called the federal arrest very unusual, arguing it violated some Justice Department policy about not prosecuting the same cat twice for the same offense. They suggested that Boosie's outspokenness on social media and in his music about the criminal justice system might have influenced the federal pursuit.
They went appeal the Supreme Court ruling, and they won on the Supreme Court ruling. Now it was back again.
The emotional toll was written all over his face. Boosie expressed his frustration publicly, letting his people know this felt like straight harassment. He even hit social media to apologize to his children, writing, "I want to take this time to apologize to my kids. I am sorry and I love y'all forever." The thought of potentially doing federal time while his 9 kids watched from the sidelines was clearly eating him alive. Boosie pleaded not guilty to the federal charges and was initially detained. But on June 20th, 2023, a magistrate judge granted him bail on a $50,000 bond, later raised to $100,000. The conditions allowed him to travel for shows, which gave him some financial stability during this wild period. But that federal case was hanging over his head like a storm cloud. For over a year, Boosie was stuck in legal purgatory, never knowing when the other shoe would drop. He kept touring, recording music, and maintaining his public image. But anybody close to him could see the stress was wearing him down. The uncertainty of possibly facing decades in federal prison was weighing on every part of his life and career.
Could have appealed that, but that'll be 2-3 more years, and I'm just wasn't gonna go to trial with it,
On July 12, 2024, U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bencho dismissed the federal firearm possession charge, citing a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, United States v. Duarte, that found prohibiting nonviolent felons from owning guns unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. Since Boo's prior convictions were for nonviolent drug offenses, his legal team successfully argued he shouldn't be stripped of his gun rights based on this new precedent. The celebration was immediate and emotional. Boosie was crying tears of joy outside the courtroom, saying, "This situation made me see who was down with me and who wasn't. God had a different plan." He even posted a celebration video from the lazy river at San Diego's Sycuan Casino Resort, looking like he had finally put this chapter behind him once and for all. 4 cats who had followed Boosie's journey through decades of legal battles, this felt like the happy ending his story deserved. Here was a man who had survived the streets, beaten a murder charge, served his time, and was now being vindicated by the highest courts in the land. The redemption story seemed complete, but the federal prosecutors had other plans and they weren't about to let this slide. The dismissal lasted less than 2 weeks before they came back swinging even harder. On July 19, 2024, U.S. Attorney Tara McGrath's office re-indicted Boosie on 2 counts, one for possession of a firearm by a felon in interstate commerce and a new charge of knowingly possessing a firearm while using or addicted to a controlled substance. The re-indictment was seeking forfeiture of all firearms and ammunition involved, and if convicted on both charges, Boosie could face up to 25 years in federal prison.
I was celebrating, man.
And we were celebrating too early.
I was celebrating.
The emotional whiplash was devastating. One minute, Boosie was celebrating his freedom and vindication. The next, he was facing even more serious charges than before. His reaction on social media was raw and unfiltered, showing the anger and frustration of someone who felt like the system was deliberately trying to destroy him.
I got a call on the beach 3 weeks later with my family. Say they just indicted you again. They added a charge, say I was a drug addict.
I think they were trying to use one of my interviews to justify that over something that you were talking about from like 10 years ago.
The addition of the drug-related charge was particularly grimy as Boosie questioned why it wasn't included in the initial indictment, calling the process a circus and alleging prosecutorial overreach. The timing felt deliberately cruel to let him celebrate his freedom only to snatch it away again with even harsher potential consequences seemed designed to break his spirit completely. This was the moment when Boosie Badass realized this fight was bigger than him, bigger than his legal team, and potentially bigger than his ability to overcome through sheer determination and street smarts. The federal government had made it clear they weren't letting this case go, regardless of appellate court decisions or constitutional arguments when the streets call it quits. By the summer of 2025, Boosie Badass was a man fighting a war on multiple fronts, not just against the federal government, but against his own pride and the streets that raised him. The relentless legal pressure had worn him down like water on stone, affecting his spirit, his family, and his people. For damn near 3 years, he'd been battling a case that kept evolving and getting worse every time he thought he'd found a way to beat it. The emotional and financial cost was becoming too much to bear, and the same cat who once declared he'd never fold was starting to realize that sometimes the realest thing you can do is know when to walk away from a fight you can't win.
I wasn't gonna go to trial with it, you know.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna go to trial with it from the dump, actually, but I feel like this the right move for me. You know, I trust in God, Vlad. I mean.
The decision that would change everything didn't come from his high-powered attorneys or his street advisors. It came from the people who loved him most. In conversations that must have been heart-wrenching for everyone involved, Boo's family helped him see what his pride had been preventing him from acknowledging, that sometimes the most gangster thing you can do is prioritize what matters most and live to fight another day. I thought this case was over and I was going to get on with my life, but God don't make mistakes, and I'm tired of fighting. Talked to my family, and this is the right decision. On August 4th, 2025, Boosie announced on X that he had accepted a plea deal in the federal gun case. The announcement sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and his massive fan base. This was the same dude who had fought the system tooth and nail for decades, who had beaten a murder charge against impossible odds, who had proclaimed his innocence and his right to bear arms. Now he was throwing in the towel. But for those who really knew him, this wasn't surrender. It was strategic survival.
Stop asking for a fucking pardon. You taking your faith out. You taking your faith out of God. You ask God to put faith in a man.
His mother's wisdom couldn't be denied in this decision.
Stop asking a man. Stop asking people. So, you know, I trust in God, man. I mean, my prize ain't I don't have no bad prize. I mean.
On August 26th, 2025, Boosie formally pleaded guilty to one count of being a felon in possession of a firearm before a federal judge in San Diego. The courtroom scene was heavy with emotion.
Now Hatch, known as Boosie to his fans, now awaits sentencing. He's a father of 9 kids. His fiancée was with him in court today. So some background on this case.
The weight of his decision was evident in every word he spoke to reporters outside the courthouse.
So I just want to get it over with, you know. Accept my guilty plea. I'm ready to get over it.
Anything you want to say to your fans?
Just say a prayer for me.
When the media pressed him about what he needed most from his supporters, his response was simple.
Just say a prayer for me. I just need prayer. I don't need nothing else. Yeah.
The charge carries a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison, though federal prosecutors agreed to drop the second firearm charge tied to drug use and recommend a 2-year prison sentence as part of the plea deal. The agreement also includes 3 years of supervised release after any prison term, and prosecutors agreed not to pursue extra financial penalties, citing Boo's limited financial prospects. Details of the plea deal revealed the interstate element that triggered federal jurisdiction. Prosecutors disclosed that Bowie had purchased the Glock and Hellcat handguns in Georgia and transported them to San Diego on a Delta Airlines flight the day of his arrest. This detail satisfied the interstate commerce factor that made it a federal rather than state crime.
In the plea deal, that they throwing that out. I
Okay,
guess.
they threw that out.
And Hatch currently lives in Atlanta. Now he faces a maximum of 15 years behind bars. His defense attorney did not disclose any parts of the plea agreement or any details about it, but the judge made it very clear today, regardless of what's in that plea agreement, it is the sentencing judge who will have the final say.
But for all the legal technicalities and plea negotiations, the human cost of this saga can't be measured in years or dollars. Boosie's attorney, Megan Blanco, stressed the personal toll while showing cautious optimism about the sentencing outcome. She highlighted Boosie's community involvement and charitable work, telling reporters, "I am optimistic for Mr. Hatch. He wanted nothing more than to accept responsibility and move forward. Now it's my job to make sure the court understands the scope of the case and what this case is really about."
And now it's my job to make sure the court understands the scope of the case and what the case is really about. And more importantly, all of the amazing things that Mr. Hatch has done for the community, continues to do, and the amazing things that he will do going forward.
The timing of the sentencing adds another layer of tragedy to this story. The sentencing hearing is set for November 21st, 2025, which lands just days after Boo's birthday. The 43-year-old father of 9 will learn his fate during what should be a moment of celebration. Instead, he's staring at the possibility of spending his prime years locked up in federal prison. Despite the uncertainty, Boosie has kept grinding and performing while free on his $100,000 bond.
That ain't how I go in Fed court. Once you take a plea, your sentencing ain't till 2-3 months after that. So I'm gonna be.
The resilience he's shown throughout this ordeal is what real street soldiers are built from. Even while staring down the possibility of years in the pen, he's kept his performance schedule lit and kept pushing his music. His album, Words of a Real One, dropped on August 1st, 2025, just days before his guilty plea, proving his dedication to the craft even in the darkest hours. Not everybody in hip-hop has shown love during this rough season. The loudest hater has been Charleston White.
Greatest alive on top 5.
White taunted, referring to Boosie's claim to be among the greatest rappers of all time.
Oh, I hope they send you somewhere where they mistreat Boosie.
White's commentary kept going, showing a level of cruelty that shocked even cats who were already used to his provocative bullshit.
So God have to push you where you gonna serve him in jail?
Charleston White went public saying he hoped Bowie would die in jail, showing just how personal the beef between them had become. But for every hater, there were countless voices showing love and understanding for Boo's situation. His choice to take the plea deal got praised across the hip-hop community as a mature, strategic move that put family survival above ego and street pride.
It was up to the judge to give me credit for my anger monitor. But it's up to God to get to that judge, man. You know, I mean, I'm ready for whatever, Vlad. Like, I'm built like this, Vlad. Like I told you, God want me free, gonna keep me free.
Philosophical acceptance in his voice during recent interviews reveals a man who has made peace with his decision.
Gonna send my ass to jail. That'd be calm. That's all that be.
I mean, you've done it before. I'm being honest.
Right.
This is not me in front of the camera. I've never seen a gun on the coffee table.
As November 21st, 2025 gets closer, the whole hip-hop culture is holding its breath, waiting to see the fate of one of its most authentic and resilient voices. U.S. District Judge Kathy Ben-Sveno will decide whether Boosie gets the recommended 2-year sentence or something closer to the 15-year.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever had a judge who I would say is fair. Judges always stuck it to me.
Do you think it's because this judge is in California as opposed to Louisiana? Because you've always had Louisiana judges, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The hope in his voice when speaking about Judge Benno shows he believes this could finally be the fair shake he's been chasing his whole legal career. Whether November 21st, 2025 marks the end of Boosie Badaz's run in the streets, or just another chapter in his wild survival story is still unknown. What's certain is that his path from the Baton Rouge projects to federal courtrooms in San Diego stands as one of hip-hop's most gripping tales, a story of raw talent, street respect, pain, and the human will to push through even when the odds are heavy. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen.